Hello everyone and welcome to this webinar. My name is Trévien and I'm the Head of Content Marketing at Passle. So I'm particularly interested in talking about blogs today in a B2B context rather than a personal one or a B2C context. And as you're going to see today, I'm going to share a few tips for how to develop your business blog in the most effective way possible so that everybody on your team gets a voice. So, okay, let's get started. So, what is a blog? Well, I'm hoping that you're already familiar with what a blog is, but it makes sense before we get properly started to discuss a little bit what it really is. I love this graphic, by the way. But to give a very basic definition of blogging, it's a website that you or several people update regularly with news, insights, commentary, and more. Anyone can create a blog, as you know, and since blogs have been in existence, they've really flourished in all sorts of ways, from wedding blogs, where a bride keeps wedding guests informed as to preparations, for instance, to say a law firm sharing their latest charity bike ride adventures. They work really well for niches, I find. If you can think of a topic, you will almost certainly find a blog that corresponds to it. Is it new? No, blogging turns 23 years old this year. It's old enough to smoke, vote and get married in most places in the world. But of course it hasn't always been that way. Much like a real human 23-year-old, it hasn't always been in the same physical shape. When it first started, when blogging was first created, it really was more of an online diary. It was used for that sort of thing. And actually one of the early names for bloggers was escribitionists, which is a fantastic word, I think you can agree. Bit of a shame it didn't catch on. The word blog itself is actually short for weblog, so you get that idea, of logging your day-to-day activities. But fast forward to 23 years, and blogging isn't just about recounting what you got up to that day anymore, and it's no longer quite as private, although some people still use blogs for a very private select audience too. The tech has changed, a great deal since its infancy. They can cover all sorts of formats, from image-led posts to, microblogging. I've been seeing with a lot of interest the rise of interactive blogs where, a little chatbot sort of pops up and interacts with you as part of your reading experience. So the tech is going to continue to evolve where blogs are concerned, but I think the concept at its core will always really remain very much the same. It's really a sharing of experiences, a sharing of stories, And so it comes from a personal point of view, essentially. Is it just for students? No. So, no, it's not just for students and young whiz kids. People of all ages can enjoy and use blogs to try and reach out to their audiences. Now, some of the research that we do at Passle focuses on professional services in particular and their blogging habits. So we've done a couple of reports, and one of them was on law firms, which is the data that I'm sharing on this particular slide, which is that, a law firm, the average UK top 100 law firm, to be more precise, blogs on average 281 times in a year. Now that may sound like quite a lot, but when we broke that down per number of lawyer, it actually worked out at less than one blog per year per lawyer. So it's not actually that much, really, when you think about it in those terms. Most, even the more supposedly conservative industries, such as law firms, have been catching up with blogging for sure. And the type of content that they're creating has been evolving alongside with the technology. But I have noticed a few trends, particularly when you're looking at law firms. One, it's generally only a handful of people who blog. They usually work in marketing, so it's not really the lawyers themselves. Otherwise, another trend is that it's often quite dry, so essentially like a press release or very academic, or, and that this is completely at the other end of the spectrum, it's completely irrelevant and random. So like the aforementioned charity bike rides, I mean, that's a lovely thing internally, and some of your audience will be interested to know that you are doing charitable work and raising money. But when that's the only thing that's in your blog, and you're a law firm, it doesn't look that great. It doesn't really tell you much about what kind of law firm you are. And there is, so much competition out there. You really should use blogging as a way to stand out and differentiate yourself by really focusing on what you are expert in and what makes you you. So do blog about charity bike rides, but maybe put a spin on it so that it becomes not just your average charity bike ride sharing post. I don't know why I've got such a thing for charity bike rides, I'm sorry. But the conclusion is that, in other words, that they do blog, but it's not always very thoughtfully done and not very effectively done. And so as a result, they're not going to really see much ROI, I suspect, from those types of activities. Okay, so moving on, I thought it'd be good to discuss briefly where blogging fits into a larger content marketing strategy. Okay, because sometimes when people talk about content marketing, they think blogging, and that's the only type of content marketing they can think of. But content marketing is way more than just blogging. There's so many formats, like videos and podcasts and webinars such as this one, quizzes, and much more. And again, the tech will continue to evolve and will add more and more things to the list of what content marketing is. Blogging is just one aspect. Now, this pyramid, the Hero Hub Hygiene pyramid, is one that has been put together by YouTube. And it's quite a useful way of thinking about where all your pieces of content fit as part of your strategy, as it were. And so I'm going to briefly let you know what they stand for if you're not familiar with them. And then I'm going to go into what blogging can do to sort of help all three of those aspects that you're trying to do. So Hero is your big piece of marketing, as the name kind of implies. So it could be a conference that you're organising or attending, maybe, a white paper, a large piece of research, like, for instance, that research that I just mentioned about law firms. For us, that would be a Hero piece of content, for instance. So all that kind of stuff. It's big, it's maybe only a couple of times a year, and a lot of your marketing activities are going to be focusing on supporting that Hero piece of content. Then you have hygiene right at the bottom. Now that's what needs to always be switched on. So that's your about us, that's your brochure that you hand out, that's your specs. It's the stuff that people should be able to find easily and get an idea that way of who you are without too much fuss. Other stuff that would count as that as well as your more evergreen types of content, and that does include blogs actually. And then finally, Hub in the middle is the heartbeat, as it were, of your marketing. It's your regular updates. It's your social media activity. It's timely. It's relevant. It's expert led. So the tricky thing generally as a marketer when you're looking at those three things is that Hero is something you can, on the whole, outsource. As with hygiene, actually, they can be done fairly irregularly. Whereas Hub, you can't outsource it as easily if you want to stay authentic and keep control of that. And also you've got to do it really regularly. So that's the one that most businesses do struggle with compared to the other two. Okay, so let's talk about hygiene first and where blogging fits into it. So hygiene content is the stuff that search engines love. Okay, so when you are putting anything into a search engine, it is going to try its best to come up with an answer for you. So those pages like About Us and so forth are loved by search engines. So when you're thinking about blogging to support hygiene activities, you've got to think about something that's going to have some longevity to it. So looking onto this next slide, so number one, of course, would be evergreen blogs. So these are the types of blogs that would answer a question that somebody might type into a search engine. And, for instance, somebody here with that particular example that I've got here, which is what your social media profile photo says about your personality, reasonably, somebody could have just typed in, what does my social media profile photo say about my personality? It's been doing really well. If you can see on your screen, there's hundreds of shares there on LinkedIn and Facebook. So it's one that has been performing well consistently because it answers a question that matters to a lot of people. Another thing that blogging can do to fit into your search content is act almost like an FAQ, Instead of putting your FAQs hidden into a section somewhere, you could be releasing them as blog posts. So here, for instance, David Gallagher, who at the time was at Ketchum, wrote a blog post called What is PR Anyway? And again, that performed very well and will continue to do so because it is a question that people care about. I mean, you might want to ask yourself generally, when you are, out and about and you meet new strangers and you tell them what you're doing and who you work for, what is the first question that automatically pops into their mind? Or when you are meeting with clients and having a discussion about your services, again, is there a question that keeps on occurring? If so, you probably want to transform that into a blog post, and that will help your hygiene, that will help your search content, as it were. Okay, so next we're going to have a look at how blogging can support hero content. So one thought is live blogging. I'm a big fan of live blogging. So this works particularly well if you are doing a big event for work, or you're attending a big event for work. Blog alongside it. It's just a nicer way of engaging. It's more in depth as well than just live tweeting. Maybe use it as an opportunity to tag the people that are there, open up the discussion into a different direction and so forth. So live blogging is one. Interviews are another. So again, if you've got an event, maybe in the run-up to the event, you could interview the people that are going to be involved in it. Give your audience a bit of a taster of what is to come. So it's a nice way of enticing people to it as well. And, if your hero isn't an event, if it's, say, a white paper, then you can also still use interviews. Maybe some of the outliers in your research, for instance, would be worth asking a few questions to, draw a different aspect out of your research. It's a great way to make it come alive, essentially. Summaries, of course. So you can use blogging as a way to give people a taster of your hero. So, do a list maybe, or some bullet points, just something that's really easy for people to digest. So that would work particularly well, say, with, again, a white paper where you could summarize the main points from it. Or if it's an event, maybe you could take top quotes from that event so that people who aren't there feel like they might have been there, or the people who are there might go, oh yeah, that was a brilliant quote, and they'll remember it forever, etc. There are lots of ways you can support hero by blogging. And then finally, hub. So that's obviously a very natural fit because by blogging regularly, you are helping hub. You are being a hub, essentially. Hub can also be thought of as social content. So where hygiene content is loved by search engines, hub content is loved by social media in general. Okay, so if you typed in, if you're trying to find a sort of piece of social content through a search engine, you would probably struggle because not meant for the same purposes, okay? So, a successful piece of hub blogging is going to be timely, so, search engines might not like that so much. It's going to be, it's the sort of thing that it will work well in the moment at a particular time. So if you were blogging, for instance, on a trending hashtag, that would work particularly well. So it's timely, it's on brand, and finally it's relevant. Okay, so those are the three important things for your blogging to be, if you want it to be a successful piece of your overall content marketing strategy. I'm going to go into a little bit more depth in a second about those three things. So for now, I'm just going to power through, but keep those three in mind because we will go back to them. Okay, so next we're going to go into best practice. Okay, so I'm going to share some thoughts on what you should do to make sure your blogging strategy works. So number one, who is your audience? Okay, so this is a hugely important question, and I'm sure you've been asked it many times. But I don't know about you, but I'm pretty tired of marketers who do presentations and go, look, I've segmented my audience. I know that there are boys and I know that there are girls. I know so much about my audience. No, that is not enough. That is not the amount of depth that we want to be getting into. Knowing whether your audience is mostly boys or mostly girls isn't really going to tell you anything useful when it comes to creating content. So move on from that. Okay, so what you need to know are, number one, what are their challenges and their pain points? Okay, what are they struggling with? What solution are you providing to them as well? And then secondly, what is their role in the purchasing process? Again, that's a much more relevant question than whether, they're male or female. Are they an influencer or are they, a decision maker? These things are important to know. Thirdly, where do they get their information? How do they consume their content? Is it online or in print? Who do they trust? Are there specific publications or people that they trust? That's where something like influencer marketing comes into action as well, but it doesn't have to be to that extent either. Just knowing, if there is a source that is particularly trustworthy is very, very powerful indeed. And then finally, what is their language? What specific words do they use to describe their problems, their customers, and their industry and market? You need to speak their language. Do they live for jargon, or would they respond better to no-nonsense prose? Okay? And you can tell a lot of that just by reading those publications that I mentioned. Draw some conclusions from their tastes. This should all inform the type of content that you create and where. Okay, so you know now who your audience is, and the next step is to give them what they want. And what they probably want is boring content. Okay, so bear with me. I know that sounds like a terrible advice, but there is reason to the madness, I promise. And I'm going to explain that by sharing with you a case study of Josh Haynam. So Josh Haynam runs a quiz building platform, and he shared his early failures in blogging at the Content Marketing Institute. And I think his is a very telling example that a lot of businesses could benefit from. So his first approach, which is a quite common error, I think, for a lot of people, is that he was trying to create really clickbaity pieces of content that drove traffic, but didn't really have much to do with his business. So we go back again to my little label of relevance. So here is a quote by Josh Haynam, where he says, "Some of the posts I created with 72 content ideas fulfill your pipeline, and 50% of searches have never been made before. Posts like these filled me with false hope. They got thousands of hits and brought attention to my site, but did absolutely nothing to move the needle on my company's monthly revenue, which was still $0. Okay? So that was his mistake. And what changed for Josh? He decided to answer a question that an audience member asked, which was, how do I make one of these personality quizzes I see on Facebook? And he thought that that was way too boring, a topic really for any kind of blog post. But, he kind of went along with it because he, might as well. And the result was he got his first paying customer. So, in fact, the week after his article went up, 4 more people signed up and paid for it. And then since then, he's had more than 500 paying customers who've come his way just from articles like, how do I make a personality quiz article? Okay, so Josh would call the personality quiz article boring content because it's not the kind of stuff that's going to get upvoted or shared hundreds of times, because it's not of interest to the very general internet reader. So the lesson here really is that Josh managed to learn to harness his niche, as it were. So instead of just trying to cater to this nebulous general internet reader who ultimately wouldn't give a damn about his business, he decided to focus on the very specific types of persons that would be interested in his business, and as a result would be really interested in these types of solutions and content that he finally started to create. So it was a win-win, really. And so it was a success, essentially, because A, it was a post that was written by an expert, the business owner himself, and that B, it was about his subject matter expertise in which he answers a question asked by his target audience. You can't really go wrong with those things. Now, I know what some of you are probably thinking, that's easier said than done. More expert, more problems. The thing is, the more expert you are in any kind of niche or business, the harder it is to remember that what you take for granted isn't so obvious to other people. So you mustn't be afraid to get basic, okay? Here are 4 questions, actually, that I'm going to throw your way that you might want to think about. They can give you a nice way to get started about finding your equivalent question of, how do I make one of these personality quizzes I see on Facebook? So those 4 questions are, what thorny aspect of your business could you clarify? Okay. 2, what assumptions do people make about your business or job title? Okay, as I mentioned, when you first meet somebody, what are they assuming about you? Can you, explain that, clarify that, tackle that in an interesting way? 3, which question do you keep getting asked? And you get asked it so much that you forget about it because you're on automatic pilot about it. That would be a good blog post. And then finally, what search terms turn up in your statistics time and time again? And are you answering those queries appropriately? Okay, most statistics will show you the search terms. It's there in Google Analytics, which is the one that many people have because it's free. You can go log into that and check out what people have been typing into the search bar, if you have a search bar, and also what keywords brought them to your website in the first place. So those will be very interesting and useful ones to pay attention to for sure. Another place we can find inspiration is a website called Answer the Public. So it's a great place to find ideas if you're not too sure about what questions people are asking. So what you do is you just you type in a keyword and you see the questions that have been typed in search engines in relationship to it. So with that beautiful circle I've got up there, I typed invoices, and it comes up with all sorts of suggestions such as why pay invoices in time, So I would really recommend going in there, type a keyword that is specific to your industry. I find the more general keywords work better for this than the really niche specific ones. And have a look in there and you might find the perfect question that could become the title of your next blog post. So I really recommend it. It's a great place to go whenever you're feeling a little bit stuck for inspiration. Okay, so next I'm going to share another case study with you. So this time it is the FinTech Collective. So the FinTech Collective is a venture capital firm in NYC. They also happen to be our first clients at Passle. I just think they have a great story, and they show, as you will see, that blogging doesn't have to be a lengthy, time-consuming process to work as a strategy. Okay, so they launched their blog, news.fintech.io, in March 2014, 3 years ago now. And since then they've created more than 3,500 blog posts, which they've then shared weekly into newsletters that they send out to a very select, specific list of investors and entrepreneurs and industry players. And the idea of their blog post, which they call a daily newsfeed, is really to keep these prospects up to date on the latest in fintech in 30 seconds or less. As they put it here, skim the headlines, have something to say when you head into your next meeting. So that is their MO, as it were. So they have a very specific strategy in mind here, which is really just to keep their target audience informed and as a result become their go-to people for disseminating and understanding the latest in fintech. So really positioning themselves as the expert in their field. Now I'm going to show you what one of their newsfeed looks like, and you'll be quite surprised, I think, by the length. So here's an example, and it is very short, okay? Jetty disclosed funding round and opens for business. As you can see, it is 3 lines long, just 2 sentences. Yeah. What he's done is he's selected a commentary, an extract from another article, and then added his own commentary and insight on it. Very quick to do. And I can actually tell you a little bit about their strategy, about how they create this as well, and how it comes about, is that they save news during the week using Pocket as they see it, and then they have a big meeting on the Friday where they review all of the news, and then they assign different news to different people in that room. So everybody gets assigned a different news story, and then they all go and create posts like this one that you can see. So it's a team effort. And then on the Sunday, their weekly newsletter goes out to their private list with, a list of all those latest posts that they've created. And it has a phenomenal open rate. So yes, that is their strategy, essentially. It's writing very short blog commentaries. And it works. It really works, as I'm going to show. Yeah. So they, you might think that that's quite a small, ineffective thing, but it's actually, garnered them a lot of success and attention quickly. They launched their blog in March 2014, and by September they were on a top 21 list of people in the NYC fintech scene that you need to know about. And then in December of that year, they were invited by the Duke of Cambridge to a reception to celebrate the success of British tech companies in New York. So, these are all very niche and very specific, both to their location and their industry, but they've made it work by keeping it really nice and tightly focused on their audience, on what matters to their audience, which is to feel like they know what they're talking about when they go into a meeting. So, job done. And here they are in front of Downing Street in London. It might be small blog posts, but it also happens to work very well in search engines too. As you can see here, they're ranking first for FinTech VC. So being really niche and focused like this has actually helped them with SEO, because they established their expertise, which is a thing that search engines love. Google's SEO quality rating guide actually states that for a page to rank as high quality, it requires a high level of expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness, which is, put into an acronym for EAT, E-A-T. And you could argue that fintech's regular blog posts count as being expert, authoritative, and trustworthy. Something that doesn't happen overnight, but that they've built up over time. And so that's why they are ranking highly on search engines, even though you would think of them as not being natural search engine fodder, because they're not evergreen, they're very timely and relevant. So you've kind of got the perfect mix really here. Great, but how do I get my team to blog? Okay, so you know now that blogging in a niche way is powerful, particularly when it's expert-led and written with your audience in mind. But how do you actually convince your own experts to create this content? That is the tricky thing, really. You can be enthusiastic about it, but not everyone in your office and your business is necessarily confident about their writing or tech savvy, and it can be quite a tricky upward hill. So I'm going to just go through the 4 main barriers to blogging and then explain some solutions to that problem. So number 1 is time. Okay, that's a big barrier to blogging. It takes a lot of time to blog. Your experts are probably, juggling lots of other tasks, and blogging, even if it's on their to-do list, is probably very low on their to-do list. They're going to prioritize other things, and they probably think it's going to take up too much of their time as well, so they're going to keep putting it off because it doesn't seem important to them. Okay, so that's a barrier. Number 2, it's difficult, which it can be. As I mentioned, not everybody feels confident as a writer, so for them to be faced with this blank piece of paper, or, in the case of blogging, a blank screen, and being asked to write under pressure is very difficult. And of course, not everybody is comfortable with technology either, especially if they have never used social media and they've never blogged before. It can feel very daunting, even a bit, scary. You'd be surprised at the number of people who seem very confident and on it really fall apart a bit when they feel they've got to blog, because it reveals all their insecurities. Okay, so that's another big barrier. The third one really is that there often isn't much of an incentive to blog. You don't always either see the results of your efforts. So even if you do blog for work, some marketing managers act like real gatekeepers, and they don't share the results of those efforts. They don't share the stats. They don't tell you how well your post has been doing compared to other posts and all that kind of stuff. So there's not much there to tempt you. What we've seen as well at Passle is that, like, some accounting firms, some law firms use the annual bonus as an incentive to get people to blog. But what happens is, yes, they'll blog that one time because there'll be the bonus, but then the rest of the year they're not going to bother because there is no carrot, there's nothing there to motivate them to create. And then finally, the last barrier is that it's paired with boring Oregon, USA. No, it's not fun for a lot of people to blog. They see it as a chore that they are not looking forward to. It's like this thing that they've got to do, but because their boss has said they've got to do it. But again, they don't see the point. They don't enjoy it. So why do it? Okay? Now these barriers can feel insurmountable sometimes, but there are ways to unlock the keys to success. Okay? So I'm going to share the 4 things, and these are all things that have worked for us as well. And I'm not talking about our clients, I'm talking internally as well, because everything that we suggest to our clients, I have done also. So only share stuff that has worked. So number 1, and so as you remember, the first barrier that I mentioned was, time and so forth. I would say the most important thing is you've got to explain the point of blogging to them, The fundamental thing is for the business itself to understand what the goal is, whether that's to build trust in their abilities as advisors or to, drive more traffic at the start of the sales funnel. You've got to explain why they want to be blogging, because if they don't see the point of it, they're not going to get into it. If there is not a clear understanding of why the authors are expected to create content, it's only a matter of time before they start to disengage, and without good content, targets will start to slip. It's as simple as that. Okay, so explain, and ideally have somebody senior that they respect do the explaining. So lead by example, as it were, and have them also do it, so that they can see that that somebody that they want to become, or that they admire in some ways doing it, then that also helps a great deal, I find. 2, simplify things, Make things as easy as possible for them, choose intuitive technology, something that's very user-friendly and not too tricky for people to get a handle on. Put processes in place that are logical and easy to implement for blogging. So that includes maybe not having too much of an approval process, or too much of a to and fro of editing and so forth. Try and keep the process as easy and simple as possible. Automate a lot of things if you can as well. And then finally also, provide training, teach them how to do it, including giving them helpful guidelines for what type of, blogging they should be creating. Having clear guidelines for content is just a huge help. And actually, one thing that I found personally very helpful within our team, so therefore I recommend it to others, is to have a content calendar. And I actually stole this format really from LinkedIn, who used to have one for Pulse every year, where they would share the monthly theme. So I did the same thing. Here you can see our content calendar for the sales, marketing and leadership teams. So the really useful thing about having a simple content calendar for the year is that it gives them something to bounce against if they ever get stuck. Okay, so I really recommend you create a simple content calendar, base it on the subjects you've decided you'll be talking about, and these should align with your business objectives as well. And then share this with all the content creators and remind them every month of the theme, along with some suggestions of the type of appropriate content they could be creating. So when I email our team every month with that month's content theme, I will give them a few bullet pointed ideas for the types of blogs that they could be creating in response to it. So it's hugely helpful if they get stuck and they know that they are meant to be creating a post by that point. Okay, so that's my top tip for that. Then the third key to success is to ask for a commitment. Again, this makes a huge amount of difference. Get them to commit to a timetable of blogging. So for instance, once a week or once a fortnight or once a month, something, it's got to come from them, the suggestion of the frequency, because it's got to be something that they think is realistic as well for them. And what we find really helpful is to have a clear deadline event as well for that content, so that they know that they are creating it for the purpose of something specific. So for instance, here at Passle, we send out a weekly newsletter on the Tuesdays. So I really push to have content from everyone on that team by Monday at the latest. We've actually set it up so that we do get automatic reminders on the Thursday and the Monday, which helps a lot, so I don't have to always remember to remind people, as it were. And but it works. We've never been stuck for content for the Tuesday newsletter, so it's worth doing, definitely. And again, it's something that they can adjust later if they find it doesn't work so well. We have it so that everybody's got one that suits them. So for instance, I commit to blogging 3 times a week. But then my colleague James has committed to blogging once a fortnight. He often ends up actually blogging once a week, because you get really into the swing of it after a while, and it's easier to do it on a weekly basis than a fortnightly basis, funnily enough. But, it is there, and he's not breaking the commitment if he does miss it 1 week, because, technically it's once a fortnight. But yeah, so it's got to be something adapted and achievable for the individual, and it's got to come from them. And then, finally, provide feedback, share results. Not getting feedback on your posts is a little bit like, if you're going bowling, but just as the ball is about to hit the pins, the curtains close and you can't see if you've hit any of them. I mean, that's would be a really rubbish game. You keep on throwing a ball, but not knowing, whether you've won, whether you've performed well, what's going on. So similarly, give your bloggers feedback and share stats with them. If they can have access to their own stats, that's even better. What we do at Passle actually is we make it a competition, which is kind of fun. Again, this is something we've tested out internally first before implementing with our clients. But basically we like to gamify the blogging process, and we award a little trophy at the end of it. So we put people into teams, and every week they get a certain amount of points depending on how much they've blogged and how many views they've had and that sort of stuff. And it works really well, and I just love to see how competitive people become about it, which actually also in turn makes it fun. So you could also do this, but what I would say, just as a note of caution, is that you should make sure that your rewards are in sync with what your success criteria is. So, for example, if you want to increase your views, I would say reward users who drive the most traffic to your blog. Okay, so don't just choose metrics that have no relation to what your end goal or your end definition of success is. Okay, so it's worth doing, and I find that generally also just pitting people against each other. I know it sounds violent, but it's also a great way of benchmarking yourself, because it can be a very lonely activity sometimes to blog. And if you can see that Jane from accounting is, posting way more than you, but has, that might bolster you into creating more content. Or you might see, on the other hand, that you've got way more views than Mike in HR, and how wonderful is that? And you might wonder, how can you keep on replicating that success? It's really hard to improve unless you get those kind of figures. A lot of people tend to say, quality rather than quantity, but when it comes to blogging, I really do disagree, especially at the start with beginner bloggers. Blog a lot, that's the only way you're going to learn, that's the only way you're going to be improving. And by blogging a lot, especially when you do get access to your stats and the results, you are able to learn from what you've been creating. So imagine that Josh Heyman, the quiz builder example I shared earlier, imagine he never had access to stats. He could have just carried on writing those clickbaity blogs forever, But instead he followed the stats. He also, saw that he wasn't making any money, obviously. And he realised that it was time to try something different, because he was getting a really high bounce rate on all of his posts. So in conclusion, try and empower your bloggers with more access, okay? So those are the four main things really: to explain, to simplify, to ask them for a commitment, and to provide feedback. So it's nothing, ridiculously complicated in any of those things, but you'd be surprised at how many businesses don't do that. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about Passle with you. So Passle was actually co-founded by two brothers, Tom and Adam Elgar, who've already, started up and exited two startups before this. And the idea for Passle actually came on their previous startup, where they were creating personalised bank cards. And they tried to blog themselves, really struggled with it. So in the end, they hired a financial journalist to write for them. And he was very good, really clever and witty and everything that you would hope for, except that he didn't really know their niche very well. So the writing just wasn't, working with the business. So in the end, they had to take that blog out into the snow and shoot it. So they realised, that nobody really knows your business as well as your experts do. So how do you make it easy for your experts to actually create that content? And so they came up with this idea where you, as you can see, you select an extract from an article that you're reading in the news, maybe industry news, for instance, and then you can add your commentary to it, your thoughts, your comments, your opinions, your expert insight, as it were. And then from that, you can also pick up the tweets of other people who are discussing that same article, therefore bringing in some extra context and voices to the same piece of content. And then, ta-da, in just a few minutes, you've created a blog post, which looks a bit like the fintech one that I was sharing earlier. So the idea really is to be able to showcase the expert's opinion without it taking a huge amount of time. Okay, so this is an example of a fresh field having done that precise thing. You can also create posts from scratch using Passle, and we have some of our clients have used it for more long form blogging too. We found that around 330 words seems to be the optimum length really for a blog post, but as you saw with fintech, sometimes 2 sentences can do it as well. So there's no right or wrong here. It all really depends again on your audience. So what is right for one business isn't going to be right for the other. So yeah, it's just really to make it easy to showcase the expert's voice, and it works very well for our clients. So yeah, so that's basically Passle in a nutshell. And if you'd like to have a demo or set up a free trial or anything like that, then I recommend that you get in touch with my colleagues by emailing sales@passle.net. You can also check out some of our own insights, including my 3 a week, if you'd like, over on blog.passle.net. And you can also tweet us at Passle. All right, so that was me, Claire Trévien, and I hope you enjoyed this webinar and that it gave you some food for thought. Thank you very much.